All right. Hi, everyone. I am Stephanie Wicker. I'm a behavior consultant in Sydney, Australia, and you can find out more about me at stephaniewicker.com. Now, today I'm going to be answering an awesome question that I received. Actually, I've received this a couple different times, but it's always phrased a little differently. But last week I was talking to a dad, and he asked me the greatest question ever. He was like, my kids are always fighting. Why don't they just love each other? Why don't they just show affection towards one another? And I thought that this was an awesome question. And just the way that he phrased it especially was like, oh, this opens up to such a great conversation. So anyway, so he and I ended up having a really, really amazing conversation. And I wanted to share some of what we talked about with you, because I think that everyone should know this stuff. Okay, so what does psychology have to say about love is basically what I'm going to be answering today. And then from there, we're going to look at if my kids do love one another, then why are they always fighting? And how can I get them to be more affectionate? So I'm going to be answering kind of those three different things. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is give you a very broad overview, very broad, of what psychology tells us about love. The cool thing about this topic is basically any popular topic in today's society has had some kind of research and testing done on it, okay? Because people care, right? And if someone cares about a topic, then science is like, I got this, and they jump on it and they do research on it. So there's been a lot of data taken on this very subject. So what I really want to explain first off is what is required in order for someone to fall in love with somebody else when we look at it from a science or developmental angle. So this isn't going to be all airy-fairy fluff about love, unfortunately. So if you were looking for something that was a bit more sweet and touching, this ain't it. This is much more of a scientific, objective approach. So research has shown us that there are 4 factors to consider when looking at the likelihood of someone falling in love with somebody else. And in order for someone to fall in love with someone else, they need to tick all these 4 boxes, and then there's a lot more to it. So for example, there's like the intensity and things like that as well. Like, so let me explain first. Okay, so there's four boxes that you want to tick in order to increase the likelihood to a very, very high level of falling in love with someone else. And the first 2 are the main ones that we're going to be looking at, because those are the ones that affect children. So let me explain. So the first one is proximity. Being close, living close to someone else. That by itself gives you a 25% chance that you are most likely going to fall in love with that person. Okay, so proximity is really important. This is why college students tend to end up dating, tend to end up in relationships, simply because they're in the same building at the same time for a lot of time. Okay, so that duration as well. So there's years of college years, right? So proximity is very, very important. It is 25%. That's huge. Okay, so the next thing, I love this. So the next thing is commonality. So things that you have in common with another person. The more things you have in common, the higher you are up on this requirement or whatever, and the more likely you are to fall in love with that person. So proximity, commonality. The next one is life planning. So if you guys have similar goals for your life, then you're much more likely to fall in line with that person and fall in love with that person. And then the last one is sexual attraction. So those are the big 4 things. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't need to, because we're not really talking about falling in love with an adult. We're talking about kids. So let's look at the first 2, because the first 2 are strictly platonic, and they're very, very important. And science tells us that these are the 2 reasons that you don't need to worry about your kids loving one another, because according to data and according to research, you've got nothing to worry about. Chances are very, very, very good that they will love one another. And the reason that is because they are in proximity with each other for a long time. They live very close to one another. They get a lot of exposure to each other. They learn a lot about each other during that time that they live together in the same house. The second thing is they have a lot of commonalities. Now, I know what you're thinking. I have so many parents tell me, well, my daughter really likes Peppa Pig, and my son really likes Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They have nothing in common. Girl, let me tell you right now, they have a lot in common. They live in the same house. They have the same genes. They have the same parents. They probably watch the exact same TV. They probably share an iPad. They have the same interests. They enjoy the same movies. They like going to the same parks on Saturdays with the family. They have a lot in common. As a matter of fact, your family members have more in common than they do different than they do different. And we tend to focus on the differences. We tend to praise the differences. You know, one's an extrovert and one's an introvert, and one likes the color black and the other one likes the color pink. And we tend to look at those differences because we see those as defining their personality, and we get excited, you know, and we praise those things because they're developing into who they are. But the reality is that if we take a step back and think about the commonalities that they share, it is amazing. They have much, much more in common than they do apart. So those are the two big reasons, according to science. This is not just me making stuff up. This is according to actual research in psychology, that your children are very, very, very likely to love one another. So I really first want parents to find hope and peace, knowing that, guess what? Your kids do love one another. It might not seem like it all the time. They might fight sometimes. They might hit each other. They might even say, I hate you. But the reality is there's a lot of evidence proving to us that they do, in fact, love one another. So first, let's just get that done, okay? So they love one another according to evidence, all right? So let's just leave that there for just a second, because the next question is, well, if they do love one another, then why are they always fighting? Then why are they always hitting each other? Then why do they say they hate each other? All right, so this would take way too long to explain to you fully. So again, just like I did with love, I'm going to give you a broad overview of why these kinds of behaviors happen. So children act out to get their needs met, okay? So first off, that's a big one. You should write that down. Kids act out to get their needs met. So if you're finding that your children are bickering with one another, then there's something going on. There's a skill that they need. Maybe they need to learn how to compromise. Maybe they need to learn some expressive skills, like maybe they don't speak to each other well. Maybe they don't take turns. Maybe they don't narrate their planning. So for example, if you have a toddler who's not able to say something like, I'm making a bridge, and then my car is going to drive over the bridge, maybe he or she aren't able to say that, right? They're not able to narrate their play yet. And then the 4 or 5-year-old comes over, sees the toddler just making something, assumes it's a building, and he turns into a dinosaur and knocks it all over. And he's like, "Rawr!" And the 4 or 5-year-old, they might think that they have totally nailed it. They're like, I got this. I can play with my 2-year-old sister. I will have so much fun. She's going to love that I'm a monster right now, or a dinosaur right now, knocking over buildings, because who doesn't love that? Well, guess what? That toddler is like, what are you doing? That was a bridge, and my car was about to drive on it. So that inability to communicate is a lot of reasons that fighting is evoked in the first place. Okay, so that's a big deal. So that means let's work on communication. Let's work on narrating our play. Let's work on turn taking. Let's work on compromising, reasoning, all of these wonderful skills that are all involved in play. So when you're thinking, well, my kids are always fighting, my kids are always at each other's throats, well, then that means that we need to understand the function behind why those behaviors are happening consistently, and then start introducing strategies to teach them replacement behaviors. If you don't want your children to fight, what do you want? I want them to tell each other, I'm making a bridge. Would you like to join me? That's awesome. Let's teach them that. Okay, so I'll teach you how to teach your kids that, okay? All right, so first off, instead of thinking they're always fighting, we really need to break it down into individual steps that are attainable, that are reachable, that we can teach, okay? So rather than complaining about them fighting all the time, let's work on it. Let's teach them replacement skills, okay? And then the third thing is, why don't my children just show affection for one another? I love this question. I'm always forcing my kids to hug for pictures. Go kiss your sister goodbye, or go hug your sister. It's the morning. You need to say good morning to your sister, right? And we're always kind of pushing them onto each other. But why don't they do this on their own? Okay, so this is an excellent question. So the first thing that I want to cover is that if you're always telling your kids to go hug each other, if you're always telling your kids to kiss one another or whatever, then most likely, rather than building relationship skills, you might just be building compliance. They might just be, okay, mom says to do it, so I'll do it. Here you go, hug, done, right? And there's no genuine connection that's happening. Now, maybe there is. Maybe you find that just that exposure every day is enough to where they're building a relationship. That's awesome. Go for it. But what I usually hear from moms and dads is that I force them to hug one another and they don't really like it. I don't know how to make them become friends. How do I make them affectionate with one another? Look, the truth is that we develop our personality, because that's a personality trait, by the way, being affectionate with other people, saying I love you and hugs and kisses and all those kinds of things. Look, that's more of a personality trait, and that's going to develop over time. Now, we get our developed. So evidence has shown that we develop our personality through early childhood and our early teen years. And a lot of it is heavily influenced by parenting, by who is our carer, who is giving us the most exposure and experience in our early life. And that really dictates a lot, not all, but a lot of what our personality is going to look like. So if you want to raise affectionate children who hug each other, who call each other and say, hey, how are you doing? I just want to check in because I was thinking about you. You know, kids who say, I love you to each other at the end of the night. You know what? The key to doing that is modeling it. If you are the kind of parent and you tell your spouse, I love you so much. How was your day? Please tell me everything. And the kids are hearing this. The kids are hearing this beautiful exchange of affection towards one another. Then that is golden. If your family is, okay, it's Friday night. We're all watching a movie together. Let's have cuddles. Let's get a blanket out and we'll all watch a movie on the floor. Guess what? Your kids are going to do the exact same thing when they get older. All right. Because that's how we learn. We learn through experience. We learn through exposure and consistency. So if more often than not, you are cuddling with your spouse and you are cuddling your kids and you are telling them, I love you so much. I hope you've had a great day. You know, tell me about your day, whatever it is. Your children are going to start to do the same thing. Now, it's going to take time because, of course, all of these things take time. Learning skills, learning personality development, all of these things, they take several years. Okay, so the more that you force it on your kids, then more likely than not, you're really just focusing on compliance. You're really just building obedience rather than building relationship skills. So if you want to build relationship skills, then the key to that is modeling and building up their skills individually that will support them to meet the expectations that you want. I want my children to take turns. I want my children to share. I want my children to have manners. Okay. In that case, you got to teach it. All right. So if you're interested in learning more, if you want to know how to build an awesome relationship with your kids and how to get your kids to be the best of friends and all these kinds of things, please contact me. I'd love to help you out. This is a really fun topic. I love talking about it. Post a question below as well. I'm happy to answer anything. StephanieWicker.com.